we go. Welcome. Thanks for everybody for showing up today. I am Mike Ford. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Sony Pictures Imageworks. And today we've got some exciting projects to talk about. We're going to be talking a little about Imageworks in general, and then we're going to be talking about two projects, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which just came out, and this other movie, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So I've got an esteemed panel here with me. I have, to my left, I've got Theo Bialek, who is a visual effects supervisor. I have Michael Lasker, who is a visual effects supervisor. Theo worked on Guardians of the Galaxy. Michael worked on Across the Spider-Verse. I've got Alan Hawkins, our head of character animation on Across the Spider-Verse. And I've got Kerley, our pipeline architect within our dev group at Sony Pictures Imageworks. So great group of people. So, So we're going to talk a little bit about Imageworks. We're going to talk a little bit about the projects we worked on, but then at the end we'll do a little bit of a Q&A/panel. And so I'd love for all of you, if you have questions about projects, questions about Imageworks, questions about anything, we can try to answer those. But let's get started. So for me, and I think for most of you who love movies and love this idea, everything's about tell me a story. It's mom and dad asking you, hey, tell me a story, and that's what we as storytellers love to do. But you know, throughout the eons of filmmaking, throughout history, we've always been able to tell stories verbally. But how do we do this with film? How do we do this visually? And some of these stories seem really impossible to tell. It's like, how do you make an animated Spider-Man movie that looks like a comic book? That sounds pretty hard. So at Imageworks, over the last 31 years, we've really taken a lot of those impossible requests, right? So we've worked on close to 30 animated feature projects. We've worked on well over 100 visual effects projects throughout those 30 plus years. And we've actually had to take on a lot of different types of styles of projects, like a lot of diversity in the things that we've seen. So anything from Across the Spider-Verse to Hotel Transylvania to pretty much every live-action Spider-Man movie, there's been a lot of different things. There's been a lot of sort of styles that we've had to make. And that's kind of one of the things that we internally talk a lot about, is that we really don't have a house style. Bring a project to us and we'll make it. So let's take a look. So obviously there's a lot of work there, and there's a lot of work from a lot of our teams kind of across the spectrum of Imageworks. But really it's about people and technology, right? So we make the impossible possible through bringing technology and people together. And we've done this through sort of, obviously our incredible artists, but the tools that we built over the course of the years. And we've done that really to ultimately tell a story. And so some of these images obviously come from our various studio locations. So we have a studio in Vancouver, we have a studio in Los Angeles, and now we've recently opened a studio in Montreal. And on the technology side, you got the people side, you got the technology side. We've had a data center for a central data center for a really long time. that's really helped build and really made it possible to do all of these pictures. And on the software side of things, really Imageworks has been on the forefront of building some of the technology that a lot of the sort of the industry has been using for a long time. So Katana was initially developed at Imageworks. Flix, with our partners over at Sony Pictures Animation, was developed. I think we talked a little about that earlier. And then Arnold, the renderer, was co-developed at Imageworks as well. So really a lot of technology being built alongside these incredible films. And because so many of these developments have been sort of pushed out into the ecosystem of visual effects and animation, we've also had a pretty big impact on just the ability to help people make movies kind of across the board. So we've had been the recipient of lots of multiple scientific and technical awards from the Academy, and we'll hopefully continue to be able to do that. And on the open source side, so open source is a huge component of visual effects and animation. And for us, we continue to we really sort of are one of the pioneers of doing this at scale, and had started in roughly about 2009 and have continued to do so with these projects and other projects that we're cooking up right now. And that's why Sony Pictures Entertainment and Imageworks are really huge contributors to the Academy Software Foundation. And really, we continue to look forward to working with our other partner studios and obviously a lot of the vendors that we work with in order to make software easier for everybody to be able to make and tell stories. So it's with great people and great and powerful technology, and it's no surprise we get challenged by creative partners all the time, and it's no surprise what happened again over the course of the last couple of years in making these impossible worlds.
When we set out to make Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, we knew the principal challenge would be to create a film that pushed the envelope of artistic and technical innovation. We knew it would have to redefine the notion of what visual effects can achieve in animation and evoke the perception of handcrafted aesthetics through the entire picture. Love Spider-Man India. In order to create 6 vast and unique worlds and the characters that inhabit them, our development team innovated and built tool sets from the ground up. These new tools gave artists the ability to paint millions of brushstrokes in 3D space, draw animated ink lines that could mimic different styles of comic art, create realistic dripping paint, and control shadow and light like an illustrator or painter would. Ultimately, the goal was to be able to drive emotion of the movie in ways never seen before. Along with almost boundless stylization, over 600 unique characters were created to inhabit these worlds. We created a brand new crowd system that was more specific and less generic, and it brought an authenticity to the universes we were building. I really felt like we were at that barbecue. Really felt authentic. Over 150 Spider characters were made that could be animated with varying frame rates and rendered with specific visual styles. We also created 50 villains, fully rigged. They were all specific and complex, and each had a unique render style. These intricacies were pivotal in making their performances convincing. Using a new Spider crowd system, we were able to build a considerable amount of additional Spider characters with varying colors, logos, and body dimensions. This enabled us to create an almost limitless army of Spider people. Of course, on top of that, we also had to build a cat and a dinosaur. Spider-Verse films are exhilarating because of the constant creative challenges that we have to overcome. We overcome it through collaboration with Sony Pictures Animation and Imageworks teams. And today we want to give you a glimpse into how we brought one of our most challenging characters to life, Spider-Punk Hobie Brown.
How are you even cooler under your mask?
I was just cool the whole time.
Steals the show every time. So I'm going to hand this off to Alan Hawkins, who's going to go deep into how we animated Hobie, and then we'll bounce it back to me.
All right, thanks, Mike. So as Mike said, I'm Alan Hawkins, the head of character animation on Spider-Verse, and what that means primarily for my job is figuring out in the early stages who characters are, how to handle them, how they'll fit into the Spider-Verse world, how to make them unique and different from the previously established characters, especially new ones like Hobie and Spot, And Hobie had some particular challenges and quite an evolution that I want to walk through and try to share how we figured him out. So when starting with a character, obviously we get sketches early on. So these are some early drawings. You can see that his design changed a little bit. He had much smaller spikes. A lot of the emphasis was done on him in his spider suit initially. We didn't get to his face development until much later. And as you can see, the art direction of these is very visceral, active, extreme perspective poses. We want to try to make his action feel different than a typical spider person. And this stuff was all really awesome for us to have as a starting point. And so next, and here's our lineup of ultimately what his character design ended up being. To figure them out, we often start with really loose tests in animation, sometimes before the rig is even ready to work on. So what I'll play here is a little storyboard clip. This was one of maybe 5 scenes that we did that ended up being somewhat what ended up in the movie. Very broad, not a whole lot of direction right there. And using a modified Spider-Man rig from the first movie, because Hobie was not ready yet, we started our development and our first motion explorations. The ideas of him being kind of like a Xerox zine cutout were already there, and the challenge was, how do we incorporate that? How do we make that fit with everything else? Because obviously it's a very complicated design, and if we do it wrong, he might end up stealing the show in every scene that he's in. So that test was lit and rendered, and there were a lot of awesome things that we learned from it. This was taken on by the downstream departments, and then kind of left for a while. We worked on a lot of other characters in the meantime, and many months later we came back to it, and once we had our final rig and basically copied the animation. And this was a great start, but it didn't tell us everything we needed to know about him yet. We wanted to push it. So looking back at some of the reference art, like this drawing, and this one, we started to revisit some character poses. And so these are some early tests where we're trying to figure out how to handle his spidery actionness. And there's obviously a lot of extreme perspective. We wanted to make him feel graphic and strong. There's a lot of line shaping, and that was achieved with a tool that we developed way back on Hotel Transylvania, which allowed us to give us really straight straights, really dynamic curves. None of this is done for free in the rig. This is kind of like a secondary sculpting pass that we do once the pose is getting close to final. So we learned a lot how to handle his body here, and these were all really cool. And you can see in later examples that'll show you how this sort of posing ideology was applied in action. And next, these are all really fun. There's a lot of them. Okay, so back in time a little bit. We were figuring out how to do his performance and how that would be in a scene with other characters. So you can see that Gwen is here being her regular self. She has her own render style. This is a modified Miles, obviously, with some silly temp geo hair. And we learned a lot about how to do that, how to handle his motion. This told us, by failure, basically, that this was too much. This is going to be a lot for people to watch in any scene. We still wanted to go ahead and render it anyway to see what else we could learn. And as you can see, this was a lot of motion, a lot of like changing colors and imagery. And if he was ever going to be in a scene, it was going to be pretty overpowering. So we learned that as we move forward, we were going to be very careful about how to handle how much he moves. And that was also led by the voice performance by Daniel Kaluuya, which was very cool and controlled. He is not big and broad. He was not aggressive. His version of chaos was very measured, interestingly. So finally, we got a face rig for Hobie, our face design, and some character drawings. And as you can see, these are pretty broad. We never went this far with him at all. And that's because of those things that we had learned. If we had gone this big with his performance, it would have been so much on the screen all the time. His look, all of that would have been too much. So now that we finally have a rig, we did some performances, and this is something that feels much more in the realm of who he's going to be. We kept it pretty controlled. He's a cool guy. He doesn't move a whole lot, and ultimately we rendered it too. And I won't talk too much about that render stuff because Mike will speak on it more in a minute. And so next I'll show you These scenes will have some dialogue, at least the first time it plays through, and then I'll talk about how we feel like all of that stuff came together for it.
Make your own watch. But you got a nice setup, huh? Nice parents.
They're fine. I mean, we got in a fight, but they just want what's best for me, so.
That's a bloody shame.
Why?
Because you're not ready for everybody else.
Right, so one scene at a time, I think these will loop. What was great about what we learned here is that we were able to apply all of those rules that we had figured out. He's moving in a very controlled way. He's not stealing the show. We found the right balance of how to do his renders. And I just really love the kind of cat and mouse relationship that he has with Miles here. He's agitating him and providing a challenge, making Miles walk right through him. I really love the way the characters interact in this scene, and how we're able to apply all that stuff that we learned. And then there's some other rules too that we learned, like the guitar is a lower frame rate because it's an accessory, and in some cases his jacket is even offset from his body in terms of timing, so you might notice that in these here. So ultimately the final rendered shots look like this. And what we were really happy about is that he has that unique look. He feels like he's from a different dimension with its own rules, its own art style, but it's all blending in together because all the work of all the departments coming together and making sure that everything fits and gels nicely, and particularly the way the renders come in. So with that, I think I will hand it back off. Oh no, not quite yet. I'm going to show you one more action
One more
scene.
thing.
Yeah, this is an action scene, so these same ideas being applied to something a lot broader. This was a really great shot that we did towards the end, and I just love how dynamic he finally is once we get into that really cool acting stuff, or sorry, action stuff. So here are some, the final version, and then I have some freeze frames because it goes by so fast you want to just sit and look at them all. So there's a really great pose, I love that. And the downstream departments are choosing when and how to change the different looks, which you can do much more often when he's moving a lot as opposed to when he isn't. Really great anticipation pose, very active, super fun to animate, and he feels different and unique than all the other spider people, which was the main goal. And then I'll leave you with just the one time he smiles in the film, which always gets a big laugh because, I don't know, he's a great character. So anyway, back to Mike, who'll talk a little bit more about it.
It's interesting. It's just interesting how you brought up Hotel T. So many of our tools kind of go from show to show, and it's not just look at picture tools from like Spider-Verse to Mitchell's to across the Spider-Verse, but anim tools. It's really interesting. So rules are broken in the world of Spider-Punk. His world is based on the punk rock scene of the 70s London. Hobie's world is a handmade inconsistency, literally built out of constantly changing physical media. During development, we created test shots like the one Alan showed you based on experimental animation. We didn't have Hobie yet, so we used Miles for this one, learned a lot. Later on, we expanded into more sophisticated testing. Our major goal was to figure out how Hobie would move through our pipeline, so we also began delving into how we were going to build his world made out of posters and photocopies. Once Hobie's final model was built, we started look dev. There we dialed his different materials, textures, and hair, as well as creating his final rendered look that can move into lighting. Hobie's visual style and animation mimic the chaos of his world. He has a flat printed look with constantly changing colors and textures, line work that redraws along his form, and an animation style that has inconsistent frame rates. Animation controlled what styles and colors Hobie would be rendered with in order to enhance his performance. Our effects department used their proprietary Kismet tool to create Hobie's torn paper edges and dynamic line work. Punk is meant to visually stand out from the pack, but we still had to make sure he was integrated into shots, just enough so we feel like he existed with other characters. We sort of ran into the same thing with our Vulture character, where we wanted him to fit, but not fit. It's a film that pushes styles. It's safe to say that Hobie's pushes the envelope the furthest. Spider-Punk has bold colors and a chaotic raw energy, and the emotion that permeates from him and his world is anti-establishment and self-expression. Every department in our pipeline came together to bring Hobie Brown and his world to life. He's a great example of artists thinking outside the box, pushing the medium as far as it can go, and working together to find new solutions to unseen challenges. All of this adds up to a crowd favorite, super complex, and amazing character that always steals the show. Punk really stretched our pipeline. Virtually every department was involved in this character. We would have meetings where every department would just sit around and say, how are we going to do this? And they came together and they really made it work. So amazing job to the crew on this one. Thank you.
All right.